continuing our theme of looking at how psychology and sociology and science, social science can help us become better link builders and social media marketers. I wanted to move on and look at how subliminal messages work. They're not quite subliminal messages in how you think of them, but there is ways that you can subtly influence people that does have an effect proven by science that can start to have an influence on your link building and your social media efforts. Now, I'm going to, and I admit this here and I do apologise, hide a subliminal message within this presentation. So 10 out of 10 if you can spot it in the process. So hopefully that wasn't too fast enough for you to see. But no, what I'm getting at here is a study that was carried out in 1996 by a chap called Barg. Now, he did a test where he took a group of people doing studies, divided them into 3 different categories. So first up was people, the rude group, the second group was polite, and the third group were control. Now, this wasn't based on any personality traits or anything. This was decided completely at random. Now, what they wanted to do is to see if they could influence people to behave in those in those ways, in a way they wouldn't necessarily have realised. So the way that they did this was like any good psychology test. They had one test that wasn't the real test, and then something that happened on after that that was the real test, as it were. So they started out in these 3 different groups, so rude, polite, and control, and they had a task of unscrambling word puzzles. So there would be a word that might be like bother, or there might be another word like patient, and then or just random words like elephant, and they'd be scrambled up, and the job of the person taking the test was to unscramble these words and work out what they were, a bit like the countdown conundrum if you're based in the UK. And what they then did after that was told them, after the test was complete, they had to go and fetch a researcher. Now, this researcher was a stooge, and basically what they were doing, they would be deep in conversation with another researcher, another stooge. And the test really was, so the psychology that was really being carried out was how long would it take the person to interrupt this researcher? And would the process of these people picking up on words that were, that seemed to suggest rudeness, politeness, or nothing, have an impact on the search results? And the fact is, it did. So the people that had unscrambled the inverted commas rude words were more likely to interrupt sooner. The people who had the control words, were longer than the rude people, but shorter than the polite people, because the polite people had been influenced to pick up on, on the cues and acted in the way that these words behaved. So how does this impact on your link building and social media marketing? Well, it's like the words that you choose are really, really important. So when you're sending a link request, the types of words that you use within that link request will have an impact on how successful it is. And similarly, when you're writing a snippet of text at the end of your blog post to encourage people to share your content, the words that you use will influence how effective that is. Now, some of it is just some things are going to strike a chord better with other people, but actually it's because people are picking up on subtle cues, and you don't have to be in your face about it. So when you're writing a link request, maybe get people to think about the fact, when did they link out to someone before? Use words about creation, about linking, about community, about helping people out. That's going to have an influence on the output there as well. And similarly, if you've got a little snippet on the end of your blog post where you're encouraging people to share, think about the words that are subtle that encourage people to share content of yours amongst their community. So what I'm getting at here is, whenever you reach out to anyone, whenever you try and convince someone to do something with your content and to link to it, you will be using written or spoken language to achieve that. Now, what I want you to take away from this, and what I want you to be the action point, from watching this video is that by choosing those words carefully and thinking about the way that they may subtly engender results, you can be far more effective. Moving onwards in our exploration of how psychology can and does influence social media and link building, I wanted to introduce and talk about a concept called cognitive dissonance. Now, this is based on a kind of quite complicated experiment done in 1959 by Festinger and Carl Smith. Now, their test, I won't go into all the details because it's a bit complicated, but basically what it found is that if you give a group of people a boring task and then afterwards you say, oh, well, in the groups, we need the next bunch of people are coming in, we influence the way that they experience the task by telling half the group that that it's going to be an exciting task, and the other half we don't tell anything to, and then see how that influences their perception of the task. Can you be the person who tells this group that it's a really, really good experiment and really, really enjoyable? We'll give you some money for it, and there might be a bit more work in it in the future. And then you go and you tell that group, and afterwards, you then, when you report on how enjoyable the experiment was, generally you tend to have a better experience than you would have done if you'd have not been encouraged to tell other people that you had the experience that you had. So basically, cognitive dissonance is kind of about the whole the process of believing the lies that we tell ourselves. One of the things that is a common output of cognitive dissonance is that, like, for example, the harder it is to join a group or society, the more we appreciate the group or society when we get in, even if it's a relatively average, not that enjoyable group when we get in there. So kind of we self-justify ourselves for the actions that we've done previously. So like when people steal from work, quite often they say, oh, well, everyone's doing it, or whatever those different kinds of things are, that we quite often justify stuff that doesn't really make sense because of lies we tell ourselves. Now, another part of cognitive dissonance that's kind of more relevant really to the world of link building and social media and producing social media content that people want to share is that we tend to remember what we agree with in something and forget what we disagree with. So what that means is that sometimes it can be good to have different viewpoints in an article, to have a particular viewpoint that someone can identify with, or that ticks certain boxes for certain groups of people, because they'll tend to remember what they liked about the piece rather than what they didn't like about the piece. So if there's enough good things in a piece of content, you can get away with there being a few bad things. But if you're hedging your bets that different things appeal to different groups of people so everyone has a good experience, that tends to work quite well. What I really want to get across at this point, from a link building and social media point of view, is particularly when it's production of content to be shared on social networks, or you use to reach out to groups of people to link to your content, is that you need to understand and appreciate that different people will take different things from your content, and you should embrace this. So realise, the way that I would tend to do this is, okay, what groups of people are you trying to target with your content? That might be the same as your customers, but try and break it down and have a real clear idea of who the different groups of people are. And you can have a piece of content that's aimed at different groups within there, as long as there are elements that clearly appeal to that group of people. So in any one piece of content, you can have multiple audiences of it, as long as they're all taking something from that. So cognitive dissonance is that people will lie to themselves, and when they do lie to themselves, they tend to believe it very heavily. So you can take advantage of that as a link builder and social media marketer by acknowledging that people do this, tailoring your content suitably to different audiences, and realising at the same time a different piece of content might appeal to different people. So if you're producing a white paper, it can be aimed at beginners but still be reasonably satisfying to an advanced user if you understand that it acknowledges that what they know is very, very good, for example. So yeah, there's all kinds of ways that cognitive dissonance has an impact on social media marketing, but remember, different people take different things from content. That's not a bad thing, and they tend to remember what they liked rather than what they disliked. So really please groups of people rather than moderately please an even larger group of people, because people forget stuff that's kind of inconsequential. It's about producing absolutely amazing, great work.